This is to Richard the Coughlan on his video about Christians and Muslims having the same evil shit in their books. I don't know if he was making the argument or restating the argument that, you know, most Christians don't believe in, like, you know, death to gay people. Like, Roman Catholics make up like half of Christianity, which equals that of the number of Muslims in the world, basically. And they don't believe in that. Second largest denomination is Anglicans. They don't believe in that. Then the Orthodox, they don't believe in that. So that's 75% right there. As opposed, I mean, people who would say, you can't kill a gay person. You can't kill somebody who's gay. As opposed to the Muslims. So he actually has a point there. I think the problem is America. This you guys saw it was heartbreaking, that Ugandan documentary where the gay guy from London goes to Uganda and these gay people are being oppressed and they're being beaten. I mean, it's cover of the Rolling Stone. They have a picture, and you know, and he's talking to this one guy that wants to get this bill passed to have gay people executed, and the British DJ actually had to flee the country. This stuff comes from America. Supporters of Zionism. Jews. Sparks a nerve there. This is my Quran from when I went to the masjid. Forget context. That doesn't matter. And people context. Don't worry, that doesn't matter. I guess it matters only in the case of chronology or reality or history. You have all the peaceful. Well, first of all, Christianity began with the New Testament, with Jesus walking around, be nice to people, saying, "Love thy enemy, sheath thy sword, my kingdom is not of this world, love your enemy." He's against violence. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Somebody who doesn't want to accept the message of the gospel, just wipe dust from feet and walk away. That's the New Testament. The oldest codices we have are the New Testament. It's by accident that we found large chunks of what wound up going into the Tanakh, the Jewish Old Testament, which was at Qumran. But for a manuscript being passed down in history, we don't really find that many Old Testaments. We find New Testaments because the Christians were Christian. They weren't Jews. They started out as Jews, but when Christ came, it was a whole new story. And he keeps combating all that evil shit. So, if you take the New Testament, which is what Christians go by, and I realize Americans are Zionists and have all this weird crap, and this comes out of America, and that's where the garbage that went into Uganda came from. But if you look at historical churches based in history, they're centered around Christ. There's not a single creed from any of the ecumenical councils that talks about the Old Testament or Moses or Elijah. It's all about Jesus Christ and Mary. Or somebody could say for the first 300 years of Christianity, they were being slaughtered and forgave the people who were killing them, and they were banned from picking up arms, and you would not be allowed into the church if you committed a violent act or were part of any armed the Roman army or any other army. Couldn't be a part of the church. 100% pacifist for 300 years. People yell Constantine, yet Constantine was baptized on his deathbed. By an Arian. First 100 years of Islam spread by the sword from Spain to India, lands that never knew anything about Islam, didn't speak Arabic. It made its way all the way up into France until Charles Martel had to fight them at the Battle of Tours. Actually kicked their ass 3 times, pushed them out. The oldest stuff in this book, is canceled out, or at least was believed to be before John Calvin. And we actually know where this stuff comes from. See these different... Oh, you can't see the different colors. Sorry. It's actually very rainbow colored. These were written hundreds of years after Moses. They were written just before the kingdoms fell, and they went into Babylon, into bondage, as they say. And Jesus and Paul, which make up the New Testament, are overthrowing all this. You don't have to be circumcised. You know how you heard love your neighbor and hate your enemy? No. Love your enemy. Stoning adulterous women? No, Jesus put an end to that. All that blood curdling stuff? No. Can't do anything. Wars? No. No. Good old John Calvin, Martin Luther, and the King of England. 3 great people. You had a violent drunkard. You had a murdering psychopath that set up a theocratic state and murdered his best friend. And then you had a theocratic murderer that just wanted to divorce his wives and just started killing them all. Same thing with this book. The oldest parts of this book are relatively peaceful. But the stuff that comes later, just like with the New Testament, cancels that out. And where the Bible says, you have to, Paul and stuff, you got Paul and Jesus talking about, don't pick up the sword, turn the other cheek, pray for those who persecute you. This is in chronological order. It's actually, the Quran itself is not in chronological order. It just goes from longest to shortest, with the exception of one surah. A surah is a chapter, which is Surah 9, which is the last one to be revealed. And there's a division between Meccan surahs and Medina surahs. Muhammad was peaceful, relatively. To you, your religion, to me, mine. Christians, Jews are people of the book. Until he became a political leader. And then he started raiding caravans and killing people. And just as Jesus is the role model for all Christians, and what would Jesus do? And we must be as much Christ-like as we can. Same thing for Muslims. We must be as much like Muhammad as we can be, who murdered a woman's father, husband, uncle, grandfather, and children, and that night raped her. Well, had sex with her. They don't actually say rape, but somebody slaughters, a woman gets her children, her husband, and her whole family slaughtered. And then the Prophet takes her as his wife. Actually, it's concubine. It's Safiya, the Copt. Surah 9 actually abrogates these people of the book. It calls them mushrikeen, puts them in the same category as the pagans. This wasn't always followed because there still are pockets of Christians and Jews in the Islamic world. There are no pagans in the Islamic world. Zoroastrianism has been wiped out except for India, which they're called Parsis over there. Surah 9, I don't think you'd enjoy me reading it to you. Read the first 10 verses of it. There's no morality. I don't think you say morality in New Testament. I don't think there's morality in any religious book. But is there more blood-curdling stuff in the latest commands in this book than there is in that? Yeah. And the Old Testament's for the Jews. It's only in retrospect to see, oh, we knew Christ was coming the whole time. It's got a bunch of different writers, prophecies about stuff that happened that already came true 400 years before Christ was born, battles. There's no everlasting commandment to go conquer the world. The Quran in Islam, that's the command, the state of Khilafah. From year 1 of the Islamic calendar, you see a violent outspread of Islam, conquering with the sword, slaughter, subjugate. Did they conquer any Muslim land? There were no Muslim lands. Those were Christian lands and Zoroastrian lands. We know there's Christians left. Where the hell are the Zoroastrians at? No. Where are the Hindus that are living around their most sacred river, the Indus? Oh wait, they're not allowed to be there. So now their sacred river is the Ganges. If you want to compare the New Testament to the Quran, because the Jew books of that don't attack, that has nothing to do with Christianity. You can read the Old Testament all day long, or what gets called the Old Testament. It's now we got this tacked on like this because of Sola Scriptura and all other garbage. The oldest codices we find are only New Testaments. So no, the New Testament versus the Quran, New Testament is less blood-curdling. In fact, the more someone becomes a fundamentalist Christian, without the Jewish crap, without the Moses and Joshua and King David and all these. King David was an evil son of a bitch. Solomon was evil, frickin' creepy evil. Joshua slaughtered children. The Psalms have praises of smashing babies' heads against rocks. How can I have it both ways? Because there's a 400-year gap in between the writings, between Malachi and the first writings of the New Testament. And they look and read completely different. The Christian scriptures are our scriptures. Yes, I was raised a Muslim, but I actually went and found the oldest continual church on the face of the earth, which is Eastern Orthodoxy. And that New Testament, we put that together in 367 AD. That's our book. The Jew stuff, there's no theology. The theology is all in the creeds and the hymns. So, I mean, you could say, oh, well, you got creeds and hymns. You can search for violence or slay the unbeliever, subdue them, kill them. But you wouldn't find it in there. You can find it in Surah 9 and in the Medina Surahs. And Muslims will even tell you that the Medina Surahs cancel out the Meccan Surahs. Even the Quran actually says that. Kind of like how Jesus kept over, and half of the stuff that's in the Old Testament I don't even think was written when Jesus was around talking. So, it probably wasn't even there. I think the New Testament stuff is probably older than at least the versions of the Old Testament we have. You know the oldest Masoretic text that we have, the Hebrew Torah, the oldest one? About 1,000 years old. The oldest bits of the New Testament we have are just under 2,000 years old. Oldest codices are about 1,800 years old. This is very early. When you're actually looking at stuff that's written out papyrus and then vellum and then going on from there. So, no, I have to disagree with you at this point. If you're talking, I mean, I can forgive you for being an Englishman looking at America, but it kind of sucks that the Western Europeans had to tack on Mosaic law. Wasn't that annihilated by Jesus, that you're not to obey that anymore? Didn't Paul actually chastise the Judaizers in the first book written? And even Bart Ehrman, any biblical scholar, Galatians, telling you don't follow those laws. Don't you dare follow any of those Mosaic laws. And where's the conquests in the New Testament? We see Jesus getting murdered. We see the apostles being murdered and tortured in various ways. Different saints being murdered. But funny thing is, they don't lift a finger to fight. And then you have all the writings of the first 300 years of Christianity. Now I can go and grab Sahih al-Bukhari, the most reliable source, with the exception of the Quran. Sahih means reliable. Bukhari was the one that put it together. And this is what is believed. This is like kind of like Catholics view the Catechism, like on that level, or a devout Catholic would. This is the Sunnis, who are about 85% of the Muslim population. Khalid bin Walid, Hazrat Umar. You had a state of Khalifa. You had Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, and its conquest. It's racing across to subdue the earth, to have people submit. So when you try to tack on the Old Testament, which there's a 400-year gap there with this using the King James library that we have here, which is the American style of it. Yeah, sure, there's other ones that have like only a 200-year gap in between, not a 4, because they got some extra books. And even those are speculated. People speculate those to be written after some of the Gospels are written. So where's the blood-curdling violence or commanding to kill? When did Jesus ever mention homosexuality? When did Jesus condemn homosexuality? Which verse was it? Where did Paul or the apostles condemn homosexuality? And you can ask why they did it, or why the Christians, for the first 300 years, wouldn't allow you to be a Christian, be part of the church, and be walking around carrying a sword. The Jews had their book, and they remained violent. They got crushed in AD 70. then in 135 under Bar Kokhba, they said, all right, that's it. We need a new set of rules too, so we're going to use the Talmud. And that's kind of going to be our reference point, kind of like the Christians do with the New Testament, and they kind of look back and say, oh, well, that just points to this right here. So they have the Talmud and the Kabbalah now. Fortunately, America, with putting Christian scriptures with Jew scriptures, well, Zionism's perfect then, and then they resurrect all this crap, and I had to come out and defend you against that psychopath with Meir Kahane, neo-Nazi Meir Kahane lover. But no. I mean, even if we take this in its entirety with Meccan and Medina Surahs, which I think is unfair, but let's do that. Compared to the New Testament, where does Jesus say anything about homosexuality? Doesn't he stop a woman from getting stoned? Isn't there actually a famous hadith about Muhammad stoning a woman that actually confessed to him that she committed adultery? Yeah, there is that. See, it's numbered by Ramadan. It's not actually by, I should have brought the other Quran that I had. It's still a Muhammad Marduk one. But Surah 9, that's the last surah revealed. This is agreed upon by everyone. I don't know any Muslim though. It's kind of like the way Christians say, well, Galatians was the first thing that was written. Paul wrote before the Gospels were written. At least Galatians was written before the Gospels were written. Surah 9 is the latest to be revealed. Therefore, it abrogates everything that goes before it. Lay in wait for them. Slay them wherever you find them. This is an ayah. This is an actual verse in Surah 9. So, I get it. I get what you're trying to say. But you're combining two different libraries of books that weren't combined by any church. It was make your own church. John Calvin just started his own church. Martin Luther just started his own church. King England just started his own church. And then that got carried to America. Oh, hey, let's pick up this Bible and start a church, when the New Testament talks about the beginning of the church and how it was set up. So when there's somebody like me who reads this, says, well, I got to go find that church, then I can't base a church on this since the church wrote this. That doesn't make sense to base a church off of that. No. So no Christians ever wrote any of the Old Testament. It's like a reference kind of for them, and they took it extremely loosely as they do today. And Americans with their craziness in that all of the Bible is the inspired Word of God. No. Even saying inspired, I mean, the national anthem is inspired. This, however, is claimed to be dictation, the most perfect book that was ever written. This, not even in its craziest parts, says that. From Allah to Jibreel to Muhammad ibn Abdullah, that's where this is said to come from. And the latest stuff, the stuff that you must follow, is the most blood-curdling. Now, what this has to do with morality, I don't see morality and religion at all. I don't think they go together. But I'll wager my New Testament, the Jews, I don't care if Moses existed or not. Evolution's real. There was no global flood. This doesn't affect Christianity at all. Where does it talk about a global flood in the Nicene Creed or any of the ecumenical councils of the Church? See, the church wrote, edited, and compiled the New Testament. And we don't see the Old and New Testament together until crazy time over in the West. And that's when you start seeing them both together. So, I actually kind of started a little bit before with the Roman Catholics. They had already broken away from the Eastern churches, though. So, sorry, no, that does not work. I still like a lot of your videos, and but no, I wager my New Testament. And oh, by the way, I'm Eastern Orthodox, so we don't have the Book of Revelations or the Apocalypse of John, John the Revelator, St. John Divine. We don't have that. We don't read that book. That book is not allowed to be read. So you have from Matthew up until hell, I don't know, 2 Peter or Jude or whatever. Find me where it talks about slaying people, killing children, subjugation of women, killing the infidel, or killing the non-believer, or killing the pagan. Or wait, did Jesus forgive his murderers, and did St. Stephen forgive people, and did... No, I'm going to wager my Christian text, because the Tanakh, that's not a Christian, that's Jewish. That's Jewish. And just because they got smashed together about 5 centuries ago, Orthodoxy hasn't changed for about 1,500 years. So, no. The Catholics, the Roman Catholics have been playing fast and loose, yeah, but to Coughlan, it was a good drunken rant, but not if you actually look at it. It doesn't really make much sense or hold up to scrutiny. So you can take the Medina Surahs also, and with the Medina Surahs, take the soft stuff, which actually comes before and gets abrogated. Let's claim it's not even abrogated. Show me the worst stuff in the New Testament compared to the worst stuff in the Quran. Because there's about a 400 or 500 year gap with the Jew scriptures that no. Christ is God incarnate. Is there any Jew that accepts that? We have icons and pray to saints. Where do you find that in Moses? So it was actually a deist that pointed this out, and another atheist. There are atheists that do see a difference between the New Testament and the Quran. And even if you tack on the Old Testament to the New Testament is repeatedly telling the reader, don't listen to Moses. The law of Moses is gone. It got nailed to a cross. That's the whole Gospel of Matthew is written to the Jews, and it's gone. That's why for the longest time we have about equal amount of manuscripts saying Christ has not come to abolish the law but fulfill the law. And the other half says Christ has not come to fulfill the law but abolish the law, because it effectively means the same thing. It's dead and gone, you don't do it anymore. And that's written as history, whereas the Quran is written as a command for all eternity to go out and slay. There's depictions of battles in the Old Testament, but it doesn't say, and do this until the whole world is subdued and under Islamic rule, or sorry, Mosaic rule, Mosaic law. So no, I did. Tell me how I'm being crazy or irrational with this one. I'll use the latest book of the New Testament, which is probably of the Orthodox New Testament. It's a reading that people go by, which is probably the Gospel of John, and you use Surah 9, and let's compare the two. Let's compare Surah 9 to the Gospel of John. Or let's compare, you take all the Quran, even the peaceful parts that wind up getting abrogated out, and I'll take the New Testament. And then again, even if you tack on all that old crazy stuff, the New Testament is saying, don't listen to that stuff. Conversely, the Quran says, you know that peaceful stuff that I said? Well, I got power now. Let's go out and raid and rape and start wars with the Byzantine and Persian empires and destroy them and conquer them. Is this alien? You've never heard this before, or this is just bigotry, or because I don't think there's morality in either of those books. But this is blood-curdling. The first half of this is Bronze Age mythology, and then prophecies that are they're just meaningless. And then you have Gospels according to, which is from the Roman era, which we have something like 5,000 manuscripts going back to extremely early date. They're spread all across everywhere, pretty much to the same thing. None of them has Jesus carrying a sword or commanding anybody to be killed or setting up a theocracy. In fact, he speaks against it. My kingdom is not of this world. Muhammad's kingdom is of this world. It's the caliphate. Just look at Middle Eastern history. I would love come to Chicago. Come to the Chicagoland area. I'm currently not living in Chicago right now, but just outside of it. I'll actually bring you to the masjid that I grew up in, that I grew up going to. And it won't be just me biased. These are practicing Muslims that can tell you about this. In fact, that might not be a good idea, since I'm considered an apostate and you are to kill the apostate. Is there anything about killing the apostates in the New Testament? No. Peace to you. So that's 75% right there. As opposed, people who would say, you can't kill a gay person. You can't kill somebody who's gay. As opposed to the Muslims. So he actually has a point there. I think the problem is America. This you guys saw it was heartbreaking, that Ugandan documentary where the gay guy from London goes to Uganda, and these gay people are being oppressed and they're being beaten. It cover of the Rolling Stone, they have a picture, and and he's talking to this one guy that just wants to get this bill passed to have gay people executed, and the British DJ actually had to flee the country. This stuff comes from America. Supporters of Zionism. Jews. As far as America there. This is my Quran from when I went to the masjid. Forget context. That doesn't matter. And people context. Don't worry, that doesn't matter. I guess it matters only in the case of chronology or reality or history. You have all the peaceful. Well, first of all, Christianity began with the New Testament, with Jesus walking around, be nice to people, saying, "Love thy enemy, sheath thy sword, my kingdom is not of this world, love your enemy." He's against violence. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Somebody who doesn't want to accept the message of the gospel, just wipe dust from your feet and walk away. That's the New Testament. The oldest codices we have are the New Testament. It's by accident that we found large chunks of what wound up going into the Tanakh, the Jewish Old Testament, which was at Qumran. But for a manuscript being passed down in history, we don't really find that many Old Testaments. We find New Testaments because the Christians were Christian. They weren't Jews. They started out as Jews, but when Christ came, it was a whole new story. And he keeps combating all that evil shit. So, if you take the New Testament, which is what Christians go by, and I realize Americans are Zionists and have all this weird crap, and this comes out of America, and that's where the garbage that went into Uganda came from. But if you look at historical churches based in history, they're centered around Christ. There's not a single creed from any of the ecumenical councils that talks about the Old Testament. This is to Richard Coughlan on his video about Christians and Muslims having the same evil shit in their books. I don't know if he was making the argument or restating the argument that, most Christians don't believe in, death to gay people. Roman Catholics make up half of Christianity, which equals that of the number of Muslims in the world, basically. And they don't believe in that. Second largest denomination is Anglicans. They don't believe in that. Then the Orthodox, they don't